You change. Excuse me? Somebody shouting. This morning, I'm going to have a few changes to my message. Actually, one change. We're going to add some verses to what we read. But we're not going to read right away. So I want you to kind of, if you want to keep your Bible out, that's great. If you don't, we're going to take this piece by piece a little bit. You know, I've been, for some reason, struggling with this sermon all week. And as I struggle with the sermon, I have come to the conclusion that what I was struggling with is what many of you probably are struggling with every Sunday that you hear this word from the pastor's mouth, called giving. You know, pastors don't like to preach about giving. In fact, when I was in a congregation a while back, I was told, Pastor, when it comes time to talk about money, we'll let somebody else do it. Well, that offended me. Because I thought to myself, well, I can talk about money just like anyone else. And then I learned the real hardcore truth there is that no one ever listens to the pastor when he talks about money. They bring in outsiders to share that message. So this morning, as I want to tell you about being a grace giver, and as we continue looking at this last sermon in my sermon series on a world in despair, I want to give you some comfort today to understand your pastor is not necessarily talking about money. He's not talking about giving in the sense, yes, it can be money, but I want you to think in a broader term of how we are going to give grace to a world in despair. You know, oftentimes I struggle with things that happen in our lives. You know, bad things happen to good people. Many years ago, I had the luxury last night of being in Wadi Christian Church for their 125th celebration of the existence of their church. And as many of you know, this is the church that I left you guys for as a youth minister to go and be their pastor. And as many of you know, I left a young, still wet behind the ears, young man to go off to Wadi to conquer the world. And I was going to preach and teach and show the church how to be. Oh, the naivete of the youth today. Because as I arrived at Wadi, for a long time, as I told the Sunday school this morning, we were talking, I struggled as a pastor. And when I left there, I left making some people mad. You know, that's just how it goes. You know, I really made some people angry. And so I was a little hesitant last night to go back to this congregation because, you know, I haven't been there in a long time. I still have some friends there, but, you know, I didn't know what it was. And I had a very powerful moment happen. One of the gentlemen, the elders of the church I was very good friends with, I hadn't seen in a long time, came up and goes, would you like to stand up and say something? And I went, no, absolutely not. This is your pastor's time. You all celebrate. I'm just here for the show. And I said, you know, if another pastor gets up, maybe I will. And so we stood in the back talking, and finally he looked at me and he said, and the congregation, by the way, Wadi's doing awesome. I'm just so excited for him. And he leaned over to me and he said, you know, we're really doing well. And I said, that's great. That's awesome. I'm so happy for you. And then he said something that shocked me. What he said to me was, we wouldn't be doing this well had you turned us upside down. 12 years ago and shook the trees and rattled the fences and ran the people away who weren't committed, we wouldn't be doing this well. And I thought to myself as I heard those words say, not that they were reaffirming in me or anything else, I thought to myself was, when I left this congregation, I felt like a failure. But what I really was just a tool that God was using to make his way. So this morning, as we talk about being a grace giver, I want us to be talking and thinking about what that really means. And sometimes things that happen in the world seem terribly bad. And what Satan determines for evil, God determines for good. But it really comes down to how we choose to respond to the world. We can respond in bitterness and anger, or we can respond in love. Unfortunately, too often we choose the latter, myself included. So I want to read to you this morning as we start with these first few verses. We're going to read verses 1 through 6 here. I'm just going to add a few verses here from 2 Corinthians chapter 8. And now, brothers, we want you to know about the grace that God has given the Macedonian churches. Out of the most severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. For I testify they gave as much as they were able, and even beyond their ability, entirely on their own. They urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in the service to the saints, and they did not do as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord and then to us, in keeping with God's will. So we urged Titus, since he had earlier made a beginning, to bring also to a completion this act of grace upon your part. The character of a grace giver is pretty unique. As Paul wrote these words, he was using another church over in Macedonia. It wasn't even near Corinthians, as an example of what giving was like. He was trying to tell the Corinthians, look at that church over there. You know, we don't like to compare ourselves to churches. You know, that's a bad thing, okay? Just to let you know. Because we each have gifts that we want to utilize, and where God's utilizing them. But Paul saw an opportunity to say, this church way over here in Macedonia is giving out of nothing. They had nothing, and they're giving more than what they had. In the first two verses, we hear Paul saying they gave out of their poverty. Now, I have to clarify that Paul is talking about a financial giving here. And that's my disclaimer, you know, for this morning. That yes, Paul here is talking about financial. But Paul is also talking about how they gave, not only financially, but they gave of their hearts. You see, folks, I think oftentimes we get caught up in the idea of giving in the sense of we start with what we need and we give what God has left over. We start with our needs first, and then what's left over we give to God. And I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about our life, our time, our ways that we do things. You know, sometimes I must tell you, I enjoy sometimes playing golf. And I have discovered that sometimes I like to say, well, golf comes here, and then, you know, God, we'll kind of combine you into that situation at some point. When in reality, I ought to be saying to God, hey, God, what do you need me to do right this minute? And then finding time to work in my golf. And I wish that I was good about doing that, but I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not. You see, we have to give out of our poverty. I know Julie has been working with us about giving from our abundance. Well, today I want to challenge you to give from your poverty. Oftentimes as I'm meeting with people in the church, I often hear the words, you know, we are really small, we're old, and those are things that I would say are our poverty. Those are the things that we like to think we don't have a lot of. We don't have a lot of youth. We don't have a lot of strength. We don't have a lot of vitality. We're small. But Paul's telling us today that we have to give out of our poverty. If we are going to minister to a world today that is in despair, we have to stop thinking about ourselves first and start thinking about the world. Second thing the Macedonian church did was they gave liberally. That's a tongue tester, isn't it? They gave freely. They gave openly. They gave generously. They didn't look for return on their money. They looked to God and gave. They didn't look, they gave sacrificially. They said, here, take. You know, if we're going to reach a world in despair today, I'm going to be very blunt with you. We're going to have to be pretty liberal in our giving to the world. I'm not talking about financially. I'm talking about giving of ourselves. You see, we have to give not only liberally, but we have to give beyond our ability. You know, I often hear people say in the church today, well, Pastor, I just don't have that gift. I can remember a long time ago, and I may have told this story, and if I have, again, I apologize, but I'm going to tell it again. I was young. I was in the choir at my church, and it was handbell choir. Y'all remember handbells, those big silvery gold things? Well, and we went to Hazelwood. If you remember Hazelwood, you all remember that place? And it was mentally handicapped, adult disabilities place. And we were going there to play handbells for the residents. Someone in our group decided it would be a good idea for these young 12-year-old kids to go to Hazelwood and play the bells, but to get there a little early and to feed the residents and care for the residents. Now, I really don't know. I have a few ideas of who this person was, the idea was, but I don't know who it was. And that was not my gift. I don't know about you, but, and you have to remember, this is in the 80s when mental health care, it just wasn't the best. Let's just be honest. These people were locked away. These kids were locked away. I can't even imagine what it was like earlier than that. And, you know, they had diapers on and they were doing things. And I can remember saying to one of my dear friends, Alan and I were talking, and I said, Alan, I can't do this. That's gross. I can't do this. And I remember all the kids around me were saying, we can't do this. We can't do this. And for some reason, I don't remember the details, we forced ourselves to do it. And I'll tell you something. was probably one of the most powerful things that I ever learned. Because I believed it was about my ability to do that. Was it uncomfortable? You're doggone right it was uncomfortable. Was it fun? No. But there was a joy that came in those people. Did I go home in tears that day? You bet your Biffy I did. You see, we have to be the ability to give beyond our own ability. If we're going to reach a world in despair today, we have got to be able to say, I can't do it. It can't be in our vocabulary. Can I get an amen? Amen. Now y'all just convicted yourselves. I don't ever want to hear anybody say, I can't do it. Because I heard amen in everybody's mouth today. We have to give unselfishly, without question. It will be painful at times. But if we're going to reach a world in despair, we have to begin to give without question. I'm going to move on this morning. Let's go to verses 7 through 9 here real quickly. But just as you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in complete earnestness, and in your love for us, see that you also excel in this grace of giving. I am not commanding you, but I want to test the sincerity of your love by comparing it with the earnestness of others. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet your sakes he became poor, so that you, through his poverty, might become rich. Folks, I want to tell you today that I think we have begun into the church today into a new era. And that era is the first century Christian church. I think we have stepped backwards in time. And some folks today may say, oh, this is a terrible thing. But let's think about what was going on in the first century Christian church. The church was growing. God's word was preached. God's word were loved. People were sharing. They were caring. They were loving one another. It's taken me a few days to come to this grip that that's where we're headed. But there was also a bad side to that first century Christianity. There was persecution. There was murder. There was martyrs. Paul commends those things that he could say about the church in Corinth, such as their abounding faith, their knowledge, and their diligence. But he still wanted them to have a giving spirit. And we have to have that giving spirit. Despite what happens in the world, despite when or how we are persecuted, Billy, I love what you said this morning in prayer. Whether we're Shiite, Sunni, we're going to have to start loving one another. We can disagree. We can disagree. But we still have to love each other. We have to express our love. Our ability to reach the world is how are we going to express that love for the world without sacrificing what each one of us believes is a core belief in our heart. See, we live in a world today that says that if you love someone, you have to accept them 100%. I have a good friend who we don't really see eye to eye with the way he lives his life. It's his life, he lives it. I love him more than anything in the world. I'd do anything in the world for that guy. He cracks me up. He makes me laugh. But I really don't like his lifestyle. I really don't like the way he lives his life. I don't like the way he does things. I don't like the way he talks, acts. I don't like any of that. But God demands that I still love him. because I love him for who he can be, not for who he is at this moment. And if we're going to minister to a world in despair, we have got to be grace givers in the sense of loving people where they are. And we have to be an example of that love. Jesus was an example of that love to each of us. He gave that love to us without question. He didn't say, I like you, and you can only come to me if you give up your ways. I was talking to a friend today, and yesterday we were discussing this exact same thing, and I quoted to her something Joe Stowell from Moody Bible College once said. And he was talking about Baptist, and I would like to take these words and say they don't translate to Baptist, they translate to all of us. Baptist, at that time, when he was talking to me, they were really on this thing about not smoking. Smokers were bad. And Joe was saying, and he was using it metaphorically, but he was saying, it's okay. As Christians, we're really good about allowing people to blow their smoke in our face until we get them to the foot of the cross. And then once we get them to the foot of the cross, we expect them to quit cold turkey. Well, I don't know about you, but in 2003, on October 19th, at 6 o'clock and 2 seconds, I took my last draw of a cigarette. And it was the hardest thing I ever did in my life. And for the last few years, every second of every day, 365 days a year, I've wanted a cigarette. Still. Now, what Joe was saying is, wasn't really talking about cigarette smoking. What he was talking about is, we like to say, you clean yourself. We don't need you to clean yourself up. Come to the call, to the cross right now and give your life to Christ and be made new. And we want to give you that grace. We're so excited for you. And we get them there and they give their life to Christ. And as soon as they're done, we want to say to them, okay, now don't you do this, don't you do that, don't you do this, don't you do that, don't you do that. And you don't do any of those things because now you can't. Well, I don't know about you, but I got a lot of issues in my life that I've cultivated over 50 years. That if I came to the cross today, I doubt very seriously that I'd be able to get rid of them right at that moment. We have to be able to give that grace to people, to allow them to make mistakes, allow them to love, and guide and help them. But one thing I want to say, and I want to close with this today. If we are going to reach a world in despair, we cannot be Indian grace givers. Now, I know that sounds a little racist, and I apologize. I was meeting with a young lady one day, and she was of Indian descent, and I was talking about how God sometimes that we like to be Indian givers. And I said it, and it just dawned on me what a dummy I was when I said that. And she just laughed and laughed. So I'm not trying to be racist. What I'm trying to say is we can't be grace givers and say, guess what? I'm going to extend my grace to you. And then I'm going to take it back when you don't do things the way I think you should do them. All in the course of my ministry and the years, I have come to the conclusion that oftentimes I don't have all the answers, but I think I do. And oftentimes I have stood with good colleagues and good lay people in the church and said, you know what? I have a better way of doing it than you do. And my colleagues say, no, you don't, and they do it the other way. And I want to sit back and go, we'll watch and see. And then their way works. We got to stop. We got to recognize that each one of us has a gift that we can give. A gift of grace. When things don't go our way, we can't pull that grace back and say no more. Folks, I want to challenge you today as I close just to hear these last 5 verses. And here's my advice about what is best for you in this matter. Last year you were the first not only to give, but also to have the desire to do so. Now finish the work, so that your eager willingness to do it may be matched by your completion on it, according to your means. For if the willingness is here, the gift is acceptable according to what one has not, according to what he does not have. One desire is not the others might be relieved while you are hard-pressed, but there might be equality. And at the present time, you are plenty with supply what they need, so that in turn their plenty will supply what you need. Then there will be equality. As is written, he who gathered much did not have too much, and he who gathered little did not have too little. Folks, go out from this world today into a world of despair, taking all the tools that we've talked about for the last 4 weeks, and utilize them to give grace where grace needs to be given. And give it in love. May you go forth into the world today better because you gave of much or you gave of little. Go being a grace giver, not a grace